I feel like I certainly knew you for a short time when we were both at Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah,
Um,
we overlapped for was it 2 years?
I think it was about 2 years. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, and 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 then I kind of feel pretty dumb that we haven't reconnected after all this while. Um,
Man, I am so out of touch with most all of my classmates because
yeah,
I stayed in the Midwest and everyone either went to New York or LA, and I lost contact with a lot of people. So that's sort of the way it seems to work, unfortunately. But it's good all these years later to get reconnected.
yeah. I feel like with did you have that sense when you were going through graduation and kind of your last year there, your first year out in the world, that it was kind of the diaspora to LA and to New York, and
Oh
then
yeah,
everybody else was just somewhere else and
yeah.
kind of unmoored?
I don't know how it felt when you were there, but yes, everyone was either New York or LA because our school set up those two showcases in New York or LA, and anyone, I think one of the actors in my class decided to move to Chicago, and everyone
Hmm.
thought they were out of their minds for not going to one of the coasts,
Yeah,
especially as an actor, right? Uh, I don't think people paid as much, not attention, but I don't think it was quite as surprising or out of the ordinary for a director to not go to one of the coasts. But definitely
sure.
for that actor, it was, why would you want to go to Chicago? Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
want to go to New York or LA? What was it like for your class?
I feel like a lot of my colleagues kind of made a choice independent of maybe what was their expected career, what they were aiming for, that kind of thing. But for me, it was never really a question. It was I grew up in New York State. My family is in Rochester and has been for decades, if not the last century. And going back, and there's some wonderful theater growing up there. But uh, New York was theater. New York was kind of the uh, uh, city life that I expected. Um, I mean, honestly, to a point, thought that access and accessibility in a city, and specifically in New York, would be a little more possible, with public transit and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And and we could have a conversation about about transportation and that kind of thing that I'm sure would last hours,
Yeah,
but it
I'm a little
turned out to be
surprised
the
to hear
case.
you say that you thought New York would be a little easier as far as transit goes. Having been to New York, I assume you're talking mostly about the bus system and not the subway.
Yeah, no, I would say, well, in the 10 some years that I've been here, the access on this. Here's the thing. The thing that I've discovered is New York is both the best and the worst of transportation and getting to the places that you want to go.
Hmm.
It's the best because there are so many options, and it's the worst because uh, that doesn't extend to accessibility, and so um, you know, as a whole, so many fewer subway stations, and even the buses that you can guarantee the ramp will fold out and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because I was looking at, I mean, New York didn't even really cross my mind as an option after I graduated, just because of, I'd been there before, just
yeah,
because of the accessibility uh, issues in the subway system. I mean, and also the cost of living in general. I
yeah,
mean, I knew that if I would move to New York, I would need a building with an elevator, that would be, within a few blocks of an accessible subway station. And that building would, like I said, be an elevator building, likely a doorman building. I just assumed, without really taking a close look into it, but I just assumed that it would be the accessibility issue would be cost prohibitive, rather than actually physically, because I knew buildings existed that I could live in, but I didn't think that they would be something that I would be able to afford as a newly graduated theater artist. So how did you find that?
All that is true. All that is absolutely true. Yeah, it was super difficult to find the right place, or a place that could even work. It was the price point when even in finding something, it's looking at the area, the more active areas of the city, and the places that do have 4 or 5 different possibilities for subway stations, in case 3 out of the 5 either don't have elevators or they're broken down, that kind of thing. It actually took a lot of time and pre-planning um, to for me to get here. It was nearly 2 years after I graduated from Carnegie that I got down here, and a big reason for that was I was figuring out what kind of maybe funding sources or other kind of rental supports, different resources that are kind of outside of the theater world might actually be able um, to make it possible for me to afford a rent that is bumped up pretty high, and here and there were a few things that I was able to qualify for, but it really was kind of looking at all of those likely hindrances and that sense of impossibility, and seeing if I could turn it into possibility through whatever method possible. And there's a reason that uh, I'm right now talking to you from the apartment that I've been in over a dozen years now. When you find something that mostly works, you make it continue to work, and moving it would be a crazy or silly thing to do unless there was really an option, and that it made sense, because doing it the first time was a pretty big hurdle.
Yeah.
Um,
So like finding a living space that works for you and me and anyone else with mobility impairments issues, things like that. That's one thing. But what about working, like rehearsal space and things like that? Because I know even in the Midwest, I mean, I when I graduated, I moved back to Minneapolis, and now I'm in Chicago.
yeah,
But even in Chicago, there are several theaters that I know that I've, wanted to work with and started to build relationships with, only to
hmm
discover that their main rehearsal space is completely inaccessible. Right? It's on the
yeah,
second floor. It's on the second floor of a building that doesn't have an elevator, or it's on the first floor, but the restrooms are in the basement or something like that. And
hmm
uh, you know, it's and then it becomes a weird conversation within yourself of, well, what do I do now, right? Do I continue to build this relationship with this theater whose work I do like, whose mission does align with mine, and
yeah,
hopefully they might be willing to, come up or fundraise an extra few $1,000s to rent a different accessible space so we can work together? Or is it worth that conversation in the first place? Do I just sort of shrug my shoulders and try to find, not necessarily cut ties completely, but do I, put my efforts uh, somewhere else? I mean, even in Chicago, rehearsal space accessibility is spotty. What is it like in New York?
yeah, accessibility is it is the consistent, constant question, you know, and the constant uncertainty. And to a degree, it's you know, if you're working on something or with a company or with colleagues that know you and have you know you've built work together, and there's that understanding or expectation. You know, this I'm a member of the creative team, therefore we need to find accessible rehearsal spaces and that kind of thing. There's the theater company that I've been a member of and a colleague with a number of people over the course of the last maybe 10 years, and there there are times that, you know, even some of my closest friends within that theater company, they're putting together the books and they're figuring out where a space is going to be rented for a reading, and if it's in a place that is less expensive to rent that for the day, for the week, whatever it might be, and it requires, you know, setting up a ramp to get in one step or two, kind of thing. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, uh, a small company with not a lot of financial resources is, you know, I'm in at certain points taking one for the team kind of thing. That it's like, all right, well, yeah, we have a ramp, and it's a little bit more of a headache for me to get in to the space and to coordinate how we might make that access happen. But if that's what we can afford, then I want to do the work. You know, it's
Yeah.
always really just about wanting to do the work, and yet sometimes you I feel like I wish it didn't have to be um, it didn't always have to be the conversation that gets tied in um,
Yeah.
with
I mean,
just getting in somewhere and doing the work.
I think you're onto something there, because when you said want to do the work, that made me think of something. I mean, I think probably I don't know if it's a foolproof way, but probably, I mean, it might be the best way to go about this situation is just convincing this theater that there is no one else that can do this show but you.
Yeah,
And so if you want the show to succeed, this is what needs to be done. An accessible space needs to be found so we can create this thing together with my vision and your resources and your support and all the things that a producing theater company, you know, brings to the table to a director, and vice versa. Like that, this partnership is invaluable. And so I think it might just be the situation where if you can make that happen, if you can get a company to agree that this is the way forward with this show, there is no other way forward with this show but with this partnership, then hopefully people will find ways to make it work. I guess you gotta go in gangbusters, headstrong, extremely confident, set up all these meetings, and then you get into the catch-22 of oh yeah, let me know when you have a show and we'll come see
that's
it, and
right.
then we can start that conversation. And like, well, that's what I'm doing talking to you.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I love the "let me know when you have a show" version of it. It's the you know, and that's where it's independent from disability in any way. It's the director conundrum, I think, which is
yes.
um, an actor can go in, they can present their tools, their talent, their specific product, which is their body, their voice, themselves, and how they interpret and can offer a character. Right? We can do readings. We can you know, have meetings with playwrights. We can write these, feels like sometimes endless applications for different fellowships and things where we're writing up an artistic statement, and often, what is it, like a production essay where you
Oh
say
yes, the
how
production
you
essays.
would direct a particular play, but it's only within the three or four plays that they that they put on the list and that kind of thing. And that's not to say that being able to articulate the the kinds of perspectives and the choices that are that are kind of the nuts and bolts of the craft of a director, um, that there's not some value to that, but it really is the only way that anybody's come up with of um, kind of assessing directorial talent. And then the other way is, uh, let me come see something that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, certainly the in the freelance life, if you're not also kind of thinking about the things that you can do that aren't somebody calling you up and saying, we want you to do this thing at our theater for this budget. If you're not kind of thinking about it, trying to build your own work, then you know, you really are waiting for the phone to ring. But getting actually something that is a representation of all of the skill, all of the toolbox, all of the kind of perspective and distinct voice of me as a director, of you as a director. It's damn hard, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is an expectation that um, that is something that kind of is steadily going on for anybody that wants to take the next step, and it's hard to figure out what that first step is, you know.
Yeah. Speaking of how to figure out what that first step is,
Mm-hmm.
how did you? I don't know if I ever asked you this, but how did you get interested into directing specifically? Because I mean, I started out as an actor, as a
Yeah.
performer back when I was, 7, 8, well, earlier than that,
Mm-hmm.
because I just wanted attention, and that was a really easy way to get it. But I was an actor before my injury. My disability is acquired when I was 13 years old. That's when I was injured, and I continued performing in school.
Sorry,
And
you're gonna hear a chuckle over the line, and it was not about you being injured, but it was about you being injured at 13, because that actually is when I had my injury as well.
hey,
We
13.
seriously, I mean, we have eerily similar backgrounds, you know.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
well, we were probably then looking around at the same time and thinking, where is the place for me in theater, right?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's right.
Because
Yeah.
I don't think I don't recall any roles being written. And I mean, I was 13 years old. I wasn't like on the hot, I wasn't reading the dailies of the New York Times reviews and keeping up
Right.
on, what's going on. But it didn't feel like either characters were being written for actors with disabilities, or that people were, casting actors with disabilities in roles that didn't call for it.
Right.
And the things that I was seeing on TV at the time were always the very special episode of, where the protagonist meets someone with a disability, and through that relationship, uh, they are somehow built into a better person because they now have empathy or something like that. And those roles really didn't interest me very much. And
Yeah.
or there just wasn't any opportunity on live stages. So I figured that if I wanted to continue with theater, I needed to find a different outlet. So I started, directing one acts and assistant directing
Mm-hmm.
things. And I went to Carnegie for their pre-college program, and there was a directing class there, which I took, and that was great. So, and
We
then
both did that. Was that with Jed?
oh yeah, you did the summer
Yeah,
program
I
too.
did the summer program as well, and the first thing I ever
Are we
uh,
the same person?
it's possible. I think I think there are a few things that are different, but by and large, we are the same person. No, I guess when were those first little kind of directing workshops and exploring that kind of thing? When did that happen for you?
Oh, that was in high school. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that high school was the first opportunity anyone ever gave students to do directing. I either assistant directing the big musicals every year in
Right.
high school, or there was a one act festival that students wrote for and directed. So that was the first opportunity I had to actually try my hand at directing. And I
Yeah.
guess I thought, hey, yeah, this is I can do this. I can be good at this, and it keeps me involved with the process in a very similar way as a director, or at least I thought at the time. So it kept me in the game,
Yeah.
and it seemed a more feasible path at the time.
Yeah. I don't know that I was thinking through more feasible paths. Maybe I should have been. No, I feel like I held on to the acting bug, or even the acting possible acting pursuit, longer than, maybe a little longer than you did. I no, I same kind of thing. Starting in community kind of musical theater, and you do your Olivers, and you do your uh, what else did we do? Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat,
Yep.
and on and on. And I suppose I could look at the possibility that the turning point was all the way back just a year post injury from me, which was the Jiva Theater, wonderful, and certainly up until COVID, still running full season, incredible regional Lort Theater up in Rochester. They had just built out a program that they were calling their Summer Academy, which was for, I think, like 13 to 18-year olds, which was essentially built from the ground up as a conservatory style training, but for 6 weeks for students and young people that lived in Rochester over the summertime, and I participated in that for 2 years straight. The first around when I was 14, and the next around when I was 15, and to a certain degree, the guy that created that program is a wonderful actor, director, and associate artist up there at Jiva. His name is Skip Greer, and he was the one that auditioned me for that program as a young person who had started using a wheelchair, and had a major change in the physicality of his life just a few months before, and he really was an incredible kind of um, uh, just somebody that believes that theater and creative arts is a lifesaver, and is something that can change people's lives, whether your audience, whether you're participating, whether you're leading in the field, and so he uh, kind of gave me a real open-minded, open-hearted talk when I was nervous even about considering finding out if I could act again.
I mean, it seems like, as far as the outlook goes on performers, actors, roles in TV, film, and theater for people with disabilities, it seems like
Hmm.
we were born way too early, or were injured way too early. It seems like the path now, like society at large, people seem ready to be open to these stories, and
Yeah.
this what's the word I'm looking for? Um, it seems that either producer, let me start over on that. It seems like within the last 10 or 15 years, audiences and producers are much more open to, and writers too, creating stories with for and by artists with disabilities.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that across all entertainment formats. What
That's interesting. Do you think if you can place yourself back and the kind of visibility of of artists with disabilities, actors with disabilities, roles for people with disabilities, if that was what it is now, that you might have continued to pursue an acting side of things rather than a directing side of things?
I think I probably would have tried,
Wow, cool. Yeah.
uh, I would have at least auditioned for DFA programs,
Hmm.
right? I would have at least, because I mean, you know how important it is to see yourself on stage and be able to go,
Yeah.
that's what I want to be. That is possible for me. I see
Yeah.
that. And that is like, that is something that's tangible and achievable. And that's, that's clear with any sort of minority group, is representation equals participation. And vice versa. It's whatever it is, cyclical cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I absolutely would have at least gave it a go, because I loved being up on stage. I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved
Really
performing
cool.
and living within a character, and having fun with my friends. And yeah, I think I absolutely would have given it a shot. I don't know how
That's great.
successful I would have been, but I mean, what do you think? Do you think you would have?
Honestly, I don't think I would have. I don't think I
No?
would have. I think, and honestly, I did apply to a couple. I applied at CMU as in musical theater and in directing, actually, and
Uh-huh.
certainly didn't get in musical theater. But I did get into I think a Boston conservatory acting program, and NYU,
Okay.
and I feel like um, I don't know. I feel like
Well,
I
you that
kind
you
of
at that point you saw, or you believed that there was a place for you in performance.
no. I mean,
Oh, okay.
no. I think I was being uh, kind of naive. I think I was. If I could place my mind back into that time, um, I think um, probably. I think I might have had some talent to be an actor, but I don't know that I would have had the drive and the kind of wherewithal uh, to figure out how to make the the industry shift for
Mm-hmm.
me and to see me. I so much more thought that kind of my brain and perspective, actually, after pursuing it, and after and during and after kind of training as a director, that I figured out that that's kind of where my brain lies. and
Okay.
and honestly, and this is even more recent in the last few years, but to a degree, as a writer as well.
Mm.
I'm been exploring the playwright side of my artistry, over the last couple of years, and uh, and I think some of that is kind of recognizing really what a tough battle it is for actors that are trying to make this their lives,
Yeah.
because of lack of curiosity and tunnel vision perspective from people in this greater industry that aren't kind of imaginative enough to see that representation, and that inclusion, and that the storytelling that is reflective of who we all are is not going to be appealing to audiences. That's I just think that's such a lack of curiosity and imagination. But But then again, we're not yet the artistic directors or the producers or the people with quite the clout to make those choices and to be the visible representation of that, so.
Well, so now that, as you say, the industry has shifted or is maybe starting to shift, and you're talking about clout and things like that. I mean, do you as a director feel any responsibility or obligation to give actors with disabilities now the opportunities that you didn't have? I mean, do you feel like there's an onus on you to um, specifically promote either stories or performers with disabilities?
Yes, but honestly, in a broader sense,
Mm.
my kind of my direct perspective that I've had in my kind of directing voice and the specific uniqueness of how I look at production and that kind of thing is I want to tell underrepresented stories, and certainly that can fall in categories of disability, but it feels to me also a lot broader than that. Um, and I think I, it's an interesting thing because there was a stretch of time when I first got to New York, and in the first couple of years, and you're trying to find your community, you're trying to find the collaborators that are going to be the people that think similar to the way that you do, or have different kind of interests in certain styles of theater, or different kinds of approaches to building work, and for a number of years I was specifically and consciously not pursuing or exploring opportunities that had anything to do with disability.
Mm-hmm.
And to a degree, it's the kind of thing that was like, all right, so I did choose directing. I do recognize my artistic kind of voice, and my greatest talent or understanding, I think, is as a director, from that perspective, and so it should be obvious. I can direct a play that has nothing to do with disability. I can direct some of these incredible stories, as you say, that are starting to find their way on stage, that do reflect on that kind of inclusion and variety of story. But uh,
I mean, I understand the desire to not feel like you are pigeonholed as the disabled director who does disabled theater, right? Who
mhm,
tells disabled stories, because you want to we want to be called upon, or we want to be thought of as someone who, as a director who is versatile, who can tell different stories of different genres and different
mhm.
styles and things like that. So I understand that. I think uh,
But we also
I
want to get work.
yes, we also want to get work. Uh, I don't know. I mean, for me, I do feel a bit of an obligation to. I mean, well, I don't know if I feel a bit of an obligation to, but I specifically find joy in offering those opportunities. So if I can
Hmm.
find a story, if I can find something that allows me to do that, I will pursue that as hard as I can. But I don't necessarily feel obligated to, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, I think I'm discovering that I think I can create more opportunity in those areas as an administrator than I can as a director.
Oh, interesting.
I'm working at a theater in Chicago as their access coordinator. And part of that not only is providing access services to patrons, but also we are creating opportunities for artists as well. We're offering classes, and we got some scholarships underwritten by donors to provide free tuition to those classes for artists with disabilities.
Yeah.
Creating commissions for a new play. By a writer with a disability for a disabled protagonist in the story. So there are things like that that I think that I'm finding, that I'm hoping are better at planting the seeds for the future than, just finding one opportunity in one play for one artist, So hopefully encourage it sounds so cliche, but encourage like the next generation to give those people the tools. And then on the flip side, giving them something to see on stage that says, yes, I am a part of this conversation. So I guess now that I'm thinking out loud, it's sort of two-handed. One, you have to have something on stage for people to feel included, and then you have to give them the tools to be able to get to that point.
I say, our responsibility is to do the job of a director, which is to acknowledge the points and the parts and the perspectives of the story that you're trying to tell, right? And if the story that if the kind of perspective on taking Hamlet is the physicality or sensory experience of this Prince of Denmark, is important to how I'm telling that story, then you find the ways to acknowledge it and to shape it. But on the other hand, I would hope that there are limits, and that you kind of find where is the limit of hand holding or making an experience of seeing a particular body on stage palatable, understandable, rather than the element of the story that you're trying to tell. Right?
Yeah.
Am I making a little bit of sense there? I don't know.
Hopefully, like you said, we'll get to a point, oh man, maybe even within our lifetimes, Evan, where it won't be an issue.
Yeah, I would think that things are, as you say, things are continue to move in that direction, and not something we've talked about or acknowledged too much on this call so far, but I do wonder how a post-pandemic theater world is going to be looking at some of these things and considering. I mean, you talk about the expense and figuring out logistics of a life in New York. You and I both have had experiences of working or pursuing work regionally, and our restricted and restrained budgets over the next even 5-10 years, or the sad possibility that only the strongest and most cash on hand theaters at the moment are going to be able to continue to produce in the near future. Does that mean that things like I know things that we've both considered about the expense of putting us up in housing at a regional theater. Are some of those resources going to go on a back burner because of this kind of new era that we're going to be living in?
Yeah, I think you're certainly right. I mean, with budget scaled back, with people potentially being cautious about coming into a theater again. I think the extra cost, you're absolutely right. The extra cost to, you know, find accessible housing for an out-of-town director, or find accessible rehearsal space for you know, a director or performer with you know, a mobility disability, may unfortunately be one of the first things to go. You know, I think, but at the same time, you know, I could direct as many virtual productions from my home as I could, right?
Yeah,
But I think
it's
the
such a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's
yeah,
been such a strange moment. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't
no, that's
mean to
right.
interrupt there, but
I think first we got to figure out in general how theater is going to move forward, because I in the last few weeks I've watched a few virtual readings, um, and I don't think that we've figured it out yet, how
yeah,
to make that format
I agree.
feel live and engaging.
Hmm.
This isn't a slight to them, to the readings that I saw, because we're doing it for the first time right now. Nobody,
Hmm.
this is all new to everyone. But I think it
Yeah,
doing virtual video conference theater requires a different kind of performing and a different kind of directing that we need to figure out,
yeah,
because it doesn't feel live, it doesn't feel engaging, and part of it is just because you don't have a scene partner in front of you. The interaction is different. One of the readings I saw relied a lot on sexual tension, and
hmm.
both sexual tension and violent tension that
Hmm.
you can that they did not figure out how to create through a screen. So
Yeah,
how do you find ways to, you know, is it the case of we can't figure out, we've tried, we can't figure out how to replicate that virtually, so we need to just write different stories to match the
right.
format we're using? Or is there some key that we're able to unlock in live, you know, in this live slash virtual performance that will enable those kinds of moments to affect us in the same way as being, you know, live on stage? Yeah. And
I
I think as far
appreciated
as
that.
moving forward, it's I don't know. I honestly don't know how this is going to shape up. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, theaters are announcing their seasons, and then they're already having to reschedule their fall performances and push back. I mean, I don't. I honestly don't know. I mean, how are you attacking the coming season as far as finding work, as far as making work, as far as working with theaters or self-producing? Like, what is your approach in this weird, wacky, upside down, backwards world we're currently?
Yeah, it's really tough because, as you say, it almost requires of each of us as artists to kind of um, see the future, or at least guess at the future of how all of this is going to come back together, and none of us know what that is going to look like. And so I feel like I'm doing the only things that are in my control. I'm doing a lot of reading, and I'm doing a lot of writing.
Mm-hmm.
The reading is reading those. I'm sure you have buckets and buckets of plays, either old plays or, for me, so many new plays. You know, I mean, a lot of my um, concentration and my joy in directing comes from developing new plays with writers. And so, you know, those plays that people sent me a year and a half ago that that we just didn't get back together to discuss, and therefore I didn't read. Um, just getting at that, and continuing to find collaborators that you know, are in my world and are telling interesting stories, and stories that I would really want to grab onto, and use my voice to share. Um, but to a degree, I also am not finding all of the specific and particular stories that, you know, some of which pop up into my head. And so I'm really more exploring a thing that I can control, which is, the a playwright side of me and putting things down on paper, because that's, the director mm, works in space and works collaboratively, and the playwright does eventually. But I'm kind of exploring the hills and valleys of what that means, to have a voice on that side of things, and also just trying to stay connected. Trying not to have this be the reason that an occasional collaborator of mine or somebody that I've known for a decade is going to, suddenly kind of uh, drift away from being in the circle of the people that I like to create work with, or that I am talking to on a semi regular basis. Trying to recognize the ways in which I don't have to be one of these people that is creating a new set of programming online, and doing it every single week. Giving permission to not be the one that has been most productive in this period, because to be honest, for a couple weeks, I both was believed by my doctor to have had the COVID virus, thankfully, in a very, very mild symptom version, compared to so much of the horrible nature of what's going on out there. But also just navigating, you know, life in a small New York apartment as a wheelchair user. I hope the very next step is that we continue to find some success in this field, and continue to tell the stories that are both important to us, and that offer some representation and sense of the world as it is. And I think that includes disability, and I think that includes everything that we are going to be once the doors open again, and people can gather.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers to you.